Topic 2, Deep Ocean Floor Communities, Marine Communities Part 2. The deep sea floor is the most uniform environment. It is also dubbed the endless sameless. The environmental conditions, it is eternally dark, almost cold, slightly hypersaline. And creatures who live there, they have adapted by having slow metabolisms. Some may only eat once a year, and some may live up to hundreds of years. And this curious creature in this picture, seen in the Indonesian waters, has not yet been identified by scientists. So here you see some representatives of deep benthic animals. So one is the abyssal holothurian, a relative to the sea star. It's also called sea pig. And in the lower image you see a blind tripod fish. Its fins have been adapted into these long fins with which the animal stands on the seafloor. And it's thought that it helps to sense vibration on the seafloor and alerts the tripod fish when there is food coming. Here are some more representatives of deep benthic animals. The first one is a deep sea amphipod. A lot of these deep sea benthic animals, they are gigantic compared to their counterparts in shallower water. So most of the amphipods are about the size of ants, but these that were recovered from the Kermadec Trench measured 28 centimeters or 11 inches. And the lower image you see is Xenophyophore. It is a large single-cell animal that rests on the seabed, absorbing nutrients. Hydrothermal vents were discovered in 1976, and I posted a video for you to show. Here on this map you see the location of hydrothermal vents. You can see they are mostly associated with the plate tectonics. We have been discovering many more, so this map is by now probably obsolete. Hydrothermal vents are black or white smokers, and we talked about them before, how seawater seeps through the seafloor rock, and that water is heated up by the magma, and it's coming back to the surface and leaching out minerals. So black smokers, they're very acidic, they have a temperature from 300 to 400 degrees centigrade, and they are associated with fast-spreading ridges. And white smokers are more on the alkaline, and the temperatures are lower, and they are associated with slow-spreading ridges. Soon after animal communities were discovered around seafloor hydrothermal vents in 1977, scientists found that vents in various regions are populated by distinct animal species. Scientists have been sorting clues to explain how seafloor populations are related and how they evolved and diverged over Earth's history. Scientists today recognize distinct assemblages of animal species in 6 major seafloor regions. These are the colored dots on the map, along the system of volcanic mountains and deep sea trenches that form the borders of Earth's tectonic plates. But unexplored ocean regions remain critical missing pieces for assembling the full evolutionary puzzle. And so here are the 6 biogeographic provinces that have been recognized. The communities in the Eastern Pacific, they have typical dominated by tube worms. In the North Atlantic, there are 2 different regions dominated by different species of shrimp and mussels. In the North Pacific Ocean, we have limpets, that are snails, tube worms and clams, and the Indian Ocean, shrimp, barnacles, and snails. Many other sites have yet to be explored. The bottom of the food chain in these hydrothermal vents are bacteria that use inorganic substances and convert them into carbohydrates. The process there is called chemosynthesis. In this example that you see here, we see 6 molecules of carbon dioxide combined with 6 molecules of oxygen and 24 molecules of hydrogen sulfides to form glucose. The energy to bond carbon atoms into glucose comes down from breaking chemical bonds. So here are some pictures of deep sea vent clams. Giant clams up to 1 foot long thrive in the crevices around a pillar lava, which vent hydrothermal fluids with chemical nutrients. And this vent site is on the Galapagos Rift and was discovered in 2002. So like these deep sea mussels, they are also dependent on energy produced by sulfur oxidizing bacteria in their gills. These clams produce large yolky eggs, leading researchers to predict that the species has limited dispersal capabilities. These deep sea mussels, they were discovered during the East Pacific Rice expedition, and these pictures were taken by the submersible Alvin. These mussels depend almost entirely on symbiotic bacteria within their gills to supply energy. Larvae of this species are thought to be actively feeding and therefore have high dispersal capabilities. Here's an image of deep sea vent shrimp, and you can see the shrimp swarming at the Rainbow Vent site in the North Atlantic. When seafloor meets the ocean, the chemistry is just amazing. So this is an image from your textbook, and here you see the path of seawater associated with hydrothermal vents. Seawater enters the fractured seabed near an active spreading center, percolates downward when it comes into contact with rocks heated by a nearby magma chamber. The warmed water expands and rises in a convection current. As it rises, the hot water dissolves minerals from surrounding fresh basalt. When the water shoots from a weak spot in the seabed, some of these minerals condense to form a chimney, up to 20 meters or 66 feet high, and a meter or 3.3 feet in diameter. As the vented water cools, metal sulfides precipitate out and form a sedimentary layer down current from the vent. Bacteria and the sediment in the surrounding water and within specialized organisms make use of the hydrogen sulfide in the water to bind carbon into glucose by chemosynthesis. This chemosynthesis forms the base of the food chains of a vent organism. And the authors tell us that this illustration is not to scale. The poster child of hydrothermal vents is the tube worm, Riftia pachyptelia. Endosymbiotic bacteria are living in the tube worm's feather-like red plumes that act like gills absorbing oxygen from seawater and hydrogen sulfide from the vent fluids. This feat is accomplished by a special type of hemoglobin in the blood that can transport oxygen and sulfide at the same time. Human hemoglobin transports only oxygen. The bacteria inside the tube worms oxidize hydrogen sulfide to create energy. The tube worm gets a steady supply of organic carbon and can grow prolifically, tacking on roughly 31 inches or 80 centimeters of white tube to their bodies every year. So they can tolerate high levels of hydrogen sulfide and temperature gradients. They can reach length close to 8 feet. They can grow 30 inches per year. They don't have any predators. They have no digestive tract, but they have endosymbiotic bacteria in their guts. When scientists found lush thickets of these 6-foot-tall, red-tipped tube worms on the seafloor in 1977, they realized that life could thrive without sunlight in extreme environments. And they were even more puzzled when they discovered that the tube worms had no mouth, digestive tract, or anus. The scientists learned that bacteria live inside the tube worms' bodies in a remarkable organ called the trophosome. And you can see the trophosome in that diagram of the tube worm. In exchange for a fertile place to live, the bacteria convert carbon dioxide into organic carbon by using chemical energy, much the way chloroplasts provide nutrition for plants via photosynthesis using the sun's energy. A team of about 12 scientists has found that the symbiotic bacteria on which the gutless, buttless tube worms depend on are surprisingly versatile. They can use 2 different ways to metabolize carbon dioxide. They can switch back and forth to accommodate fast-changing environmental conditions. The findings were published in the Science journal. Hydrothermal vents have a limited lifetime. Once the plates move away from the source, the supply for hydrothermal vents is cut off and they die and collapse. So let's look at some cold seep communities. Cold seeps are locations where hydrocarbon-rich fluids seeps up from below the seafloor, often as methane or hydrogen sulfide. So cold seeps communities, they live in cool, mineral-laden water. And organisms, they can metabolize methane. And cold seeps are found to support a significant chemosynthetic community. And I added 3 images. One is a cold seep community south of Nantucket. The other is from a Baltimore seep. And unlike other methane cold seeps, the Baltimore seep seems to have only mussels inhabiting the area. And the last one on the right is a cold hydrocarbon seep in the Gulf of Mexico. Chemosynthetic communities of tube worms live in the vicinity of the cold hydrocarbon seep. I don't like the expression chemosynthetic communities of tube worms. It is right, and at the same time it's also not quite accurate. The tube worms themselves are not chemosynthetic animals, but they have chemosynthetic bacteria living within their tissue. Another odd community that you can find in the deep ocean are whale fall communities, and they represent unique opportunities. So when whales die and they sink to the bottom, their carcasses, known as whale falls, provide a bounty of nutrients for deep water creatures. So on the right, you see orange microbes coat the skeleton of a whale that fell to the seafloor in California. And researchers found that microbes decompose whale tissue and bones, producing hydrogen sulfide nutrients that sustain thriving animal populations. Whale communities shares many species with other chemosynthetic seafloor communities, such as hydrothermal vents and seeps, and may also act as a stepping stone for them. On the left side, you can see an image. When a whale dies, the story has just begun. The massive carcass sinks to the seafloor, where it provides food for a deep sea ecosystem on the otherwise mostly barren seafloor. There are several stages to the whale fall ecosystem, as different parts of the whales are used up. In the first phase, mobile scavengers such as ratfish, hagfish, and sharks smell whale on the water and swim from afar, feeding for up to 2 years on the dead whale's soft flesh. In the second phase, it's called the enrichment opportunistic phase, worms and crustaceans and mollusks feed on the leftover blubber, often burrowing into the nutrient-enriched sediments beneath the whale for 2 years. At the final stage, called the sulfilic stage, can last decades. With only the skeleton remaining, bacteria begin breaking down lipids trapped inside the bones, generating sulfur, which attracts more bacteria and a larger community of diverse and rare species, including mussel worms, snails, and others. This diversity of species found in this last stage is larger than any known community on the deep sea floor. Before we conclude this chapter, I have 3 quick concept check questions. The first one is, which hydrothermal vent organism have no mouth, digestive tract, or anus? These vent organisms are tube worms. Tube worms found at hydrothermal vents extend tufts of tentacles from the openings of the tubes, but feeding was something of a puzzle because these animals have no mouth, digestive tract, or anus. The trunks of the worms were found to contain large feeding bodies tightly packed with bacteria, similar to those seen in the water and on the bottom near the hydrothermal vents. Here's the next question. What is one of the important inorganic molecules used for energy production at hydrothermal vents? This hydrogen sulfide. At hydrothermal vents, bacteria in the sediment, in the surrounding water, and within specialized organisms make use of the hydrogen sulfide in the water to bind carbon into glucose by chemosynthesis. This chemosynthesis forms the base of the food chains of vent organisms. And the last question, what do most deep water consumers depend on for survival? This is a little bit of a tricky question. If you answered A, you answered correctly. The productivity of the water column above. Nearly all deep ocean habitats are sparsely populated, but the few species of animals that have adapted to this impoverished place range through virtually all oceanic latitudes. There are no photosynthetic autotrophs in the deep ocean because there's no light. With the exception of rift communities, consumers at great depth must depend on the productivity of the water column above. So the only exceptions we looked at were the hydrothermal vents, seep communities, and the whale fall. So this concludes our second topic of this chapter.